Welcome to Dice and Quills, where the art of storytelling meets the roll of the dice. I am Darren Ruckle, professional game master and TTRPG writer, here to share the craft behind world building, adventure design, and running unforgettable games. Whether you're a fellow creator, an aspiring pro, or a lifelong player, you're in the right place. So sharpen your quills, ready your dice, and let's dive into the worlds we imagine. Hello adventurers, and welcome back to Dice and Quills. Today we're diving into a subject that almost every game master and writer dreams about, and almost every beginner secretly dreads: world building. Creating an entire world from scratch can feel overwhelming. It can feel like standing at the edge of an endless ocean, staring out at all the possibilities, and not knowing where to even take your first step. It's easy to get lost in the grandeur, designing endless maps, endless histories, endless cultures, and still end up with a world that's beautiful, but barely usable at the table. Today I want to change that. I'm going to show you how to build worlds that are playable, practical, and alive, without drowning in endless prep or getting stuck in world builder's paralysis. Because a world doesn't have to be perfect to be unforgettable. It just has to work. Let's get started. At its core, world building isn't about creating an encyclopedia. It's about creating a stage, a place where adventures can unfold, where characters can grow, where choices have weight. Think about the greatest fantasy settings we know: Middle-earth, the Forgotten Realms, Galarian, Athos. They weren't built overnight. But even in their earliest versions, they had one thing in common: they felt alive. A good world does a few critical things for your TTRPG campaign. It gives context to your players' choices. Laws, politics, geography, they all influence decisions. It gives weight to victories and defeats. Saving a nameless village feels flat. Saving a village with a known history and culture feels meaningful. It gives a sense of immersion. Players stop feeling like they're playing a game and start feeling like they're living in a real world. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. You do not need to build the entire world before you start. You don't need to know the name of every mountain range. You don't need to have a 2,000-year history planned out. You need enough to make the players believe in it. This is one of the most important lessons I have learned. You're not building the world for yourself. You're building it for the players. The world needs to give players hooks to grab onto, opportunities to make choices, mysteries to uncover, not just endless background details they'll never encounter. All right, so we know why world building matters. Now let's talk about where to start. And more importantly, how much you actually need before your players ever set foot in it. So where should you actually begin? The truth is, both the big picture and the small details matter, but one of them needs to come first. In practical world building for TTRPGs, you should always start with the big picture. Here's why. Without the big picture, without the framework of the world, every small detail you create later will feel disconnected, random, and forgettable. You don't need 1,000 years of history yet. You need simple, powerful foundations. Start by answering these 3 questions. What is the tone of this world? Is it heroic high fantasy, grim and gritty, wondrous and strange? Peace versus war, freedom versus tyranny, civilization versus wild magic? What makes this world different? What's the one thing that players will remember after session 1? Let me show you how fast you can build a functional big picture. Tone: heroic but dangerous. Central tension: ancient magical ruins are awakening, and kingdoms are scrambling to control them. What's different? Magic itself is unstable. Casting spells can cause reality to fracture. That's it. In 3 simple statements, I now have a world I can start running games in immediately. And more importantly, I have a world where players' actions will have context and consequences. One of the biggest mistakes new GMs make when world building is believing they need it all done before session 1. You don't. Build what you need to start, then expand based on what your players actually care about. If your players become obsessed with the ancient ruins, flesh them out more. If they decide to overthrow the king, suddenly that kingdom's politics become more important. World building isn't a novel you write alone. It's a living, breathing thing that grows alongside the players. Once you have the big picture in place, small details become easy. Add only what players will encounter soon. Think about the names of a few important cities, 2 or 3 major factions, a handful of gods or legendary figures, the immediate threats or mysteries near where they start. You don't need to design every magic item in the world before level 1. You need to know why the players should care about the next town they're riding towards. Alright, you've got your big picture. You've started adding just enough detail to breathe life into the first sessions. Now let's dig deeper. How do you design geography and cultures that feel believable, but don't drown you in prep? Let's start carving the landscape. Alright, let's talk about the bones of your world, its geography and its cultures. Because here's the thing, terrain shapes stories, culture shapes choices, and both directly shape how your players experience your world. When designing your world's geography, you don't need to start with a perfectly detailed hex map. You're not competing with Tolkien. You're creating a functional stage for adventures. Instead of trying to map an entire continent, start with 5 key locations that players might visit early on. A starting settlement where players begin, nearby danger, like ruins, wilderness, an enemy camp. A safe haven, like a monastery, large town, hidden refuge. Major threat center, like a fortress, a cursed city, villain stronghold. And maybe a mystery or wonder, like magical forest, ancient ruin, or floating island. That's it. You can literally launch an entire campaign with just 5 points on a rough map. And you know what? The players will fill in the blank spaces for you as they explore. Always remember, geography isn't just background. It defines choices. If a dangerous swamp separates 2 kingdoms, diplomacy becomes harder. If mountains are impassable in winter, players have to plan their journeys carefully. If ancient ruins lie beneath an abandoned city, rumors will naturally lead players there. When you're practical about geography, you're not just building a map. You're building story pressure points. Now what about cultures? You don't need a 400-page treatise on the agriculture practices of every village. You need simple, strong cultural touchstones players can interact with. For each major culture or region players will encounter, define just 3 things to start. What do they value most? Honor, wealth, knowledge, strength. What do they fear most? Invasion, famine, demons, internal corruption. What makes them unique? Are they sky sailors? Do they raise crystal gardens? Are they ruled by councils of elder mages? That's it. In 3 clear answers, you now have a culture players can understand and interact with. Let's say your players arrive at the city of Verosh. They value strength and honor above all else. They fear losing their ancient bloodlines to foreign influence. They are famous for their elite warrior judges who settle disputes by ritual combat. Instantly, every tavern brawl, every noble meeting, every law trial becomes a part of the culture. The world feels alive. Don't waste your energy writing a 10-page essay no one will ever read. Focus your world-building energy where it creates action, friction, and decisions at the table. Geography shapes where they can go. Culture shapes how they'll be treated when they get there. All right, we've placed our landmarks. We've given our cultures real flavor players will feel immediately. Now let's dig deeper still. How do you build history and conflict that make your world feel lived in without burying yourself in a timeline no one will ever read? If geography is the body of your world and culture is the voice, then history is its memory. A world without history feels hollow. But history doesn't have to mean hundreds of pages of timelines and lore dumps. What your world really needs is meaningful, usable history. history that drives conflict, motivates NPCs, and shapes player decisions. Here's how you can build effective history quickly and practically. Decide on a recent major event. Players engage more with recent history than with ancient legends. What's something that happened in the last 20 to 50 years? Maybe there was a brutal war that left scars still healing. Maybe a cataclysm shattered an empire. Maybe a revolution changed the ruling class. If it's recent, players will meet people who lived through it. That creates emotional texture immediately. Make sure your starting settlement or region is directly affected by past events. Maybe the mayor is a war hero. Maybe the village was once a battleground. Maybe the local temple still shelters refugees. This way, history doesn't stay on dusty bookshelves. It bleeds into everyday life. Create a lingering conflict. Good worlds have unfinished business. Old grudges between noble houses. Border disputes between kingdoms. Secret cults trying to restore a fallen empire. If conflict lingers, it gives your players choices that feel significant. Imagine a world where 20 years ago, a volcanic eruption destroyed the capital city. Now the economy is fractured. Powerful merchant guilds filled the power vacuum. Refugees built sprawling shantytowns around the surviving cities. Ancient magical artifacts buried beneath the ash are being unearthed again. In just a few strokes, you now have history your players can feel. In the economy, in the politics, in the ruins they explore. Don't write history for history's sake. Every major event in the world's past should offer places to explore, factions to ally with or fight, mysteries to solve. History isn't wallpaper. It's fuel for the story engine. And here's a practical secret. Your world's history doesn't need to be airtight. Let myths contradict each other. Let ancient records be incomplete or biased. That gives you room for player discoveries, reinterpretations, and surprises. The moment a player says, "Wait, the priest lied about the founding of the city," you've created a moment they'll never forget. All right, our world has geography, cultures, and living history. Now let's talk about magic, mythology, and mystery, and how you can use them to make your world feel wondrous without losing practical focus. Magic, mythology, mystery. These are the things that make fantasy worlds shimmer. They make players lean forward, ask questions, and dare to explore further. But in practical world building, magic and myth should never just exist for their own sake. They need to create action, choices, and consequences. You don't need a 200-page magic compendium to start. You need simple answers to these 3 questions. Who controls magic? Is magic common and taught in schools? Is it rare and feared, known only to isolated hermits? Is it regulated by a strict church or government? Who has magic determines who has power. What are the risks of magic? Is magic safe? Or does it risk summoning creatures from beyond? Does it leave visible scars? Can it corrupt the soul? Risk creates drama. Drama creates memorable stories. What is magic's place in everyday life? Is magic integrated into farming, medicine, transportation? Or is it something exotic, encountered only on dangerous quests? Answering this defines how your world feels on a daily basis. In one campaign I ran, magic was powerful but unstable. Every time a caster used a high-level spell, there was a small chance of triggering a rift surge, opening portals to other planes. This one simple rule instantly made players cautious with powerful spells, created random story opportunities, gave magic a tangible sense of danger. Magic mattered, and it shaped decisions. Mythology is the stories your world tells itself. And just like real myths, they don't all have to be true or even consistent. For major regions or cultures, create a creation myth, how the world, or their piece of it, came to be. A great catastrophe, a flood, a war, a divine punishment. a hero myth, a champion, a founder, or a betrayer. Each myth gives you instant cultural flavor and potential quest hooks. Imagine a desert tribe that believes their stars are the jeweled tears of their god, mourning a lost love. They sing to the stars before battle, hoping for courage. Or a ruined empire whose people whispered that their ancient kings grew so proud they tried to ban death itself and were cursed to become liches. Myths make your world breathe. Finally, mystery. Not every question needs an immediate answer. In fact, leaving some mysteries unexplained makes the world feel deeper. Ruins with undeciphered glyphs, lost cities no one agrees about, a mountain no one has ever climbed and no one knows why, a disease that appears once every 100 years, resisted by no known magic. Mysteries give players a reason to dig deeper. They give your world longevity. All right, we've created a world with maps, cultures, history, magic, mythology, and mystery. But even the best world building can stumble if you fall into certain traps. Let's talk about how to avoid the most common world building mistakes and keep your world playable and alive. So you've started building your world. You've laid down geography, culture, history, magic, and mystery. You're almost there. But there are still a few major traps that can derail good world building. Traps I've seen over and over again, and sometimes fallen into myself. Trap 1. Overbuilding without a purpose. This is the classic world builder's trap. Spending hours, days, weeks building layers and layers of detail that never actually impact the players. You end up with 5 competing schools of philosophy in a city your players will never even visit. Fun for you. Completely invisible to your table. Solution would be build details players can see, feel, or act on within the first 3 to 5 sessions. Trap 2. Info dumping at the table. You've done all the work, you're proud of your world, but if you try to deliver it all in a 20-minute monologue at the start of session 1, you'll lose your players immediately. Players don't want lectures, they want to discover. Reveal the world through action, dialogue, and consequences, not lectures. They learn about the war by seeing the ruined fortress. They learn about the strict magic laws when a sorcerer is arrested in the streets. Trap number 3 would be making the world static. Your world is alive. It should move when players push on it. If the players assassinate a corrupt duke, the power vacuum should cause ripples. If they rescue a legendary artifact, ancient cultures should stir. If nothing changes, the world feels fake, like a stage set instead of a living place. Always ask yourself, if the players succeed or fail here, who notices? Who reacts? Trap number 4, neglecting the player's influence. Players aren't tourists in your world. They are catalysts. Worlds that resist player agency, where players can't change anything meaningful, quickly feels suffocating. Leave spaces in your world story for players to become legends themselves. Make sure the world can evolve because of them. So remember, build with purpose. Reveal your world through discovery, not lectures. Let the world change when players act, and leave room for players to make a difference. Do that, and your world will feel real, alive, and unforgettable. All right, we've covered so much already, but before we wrap up, I want to pull back the curtain a little. Let me share a few real-world examples from my own games, times when world building made a campaign sing, and times when it almost sunk us. Because theory is great, but experience teaches faster. Now let's pull back the curtain a little, a step into the real world of the table. Because for all the structure, theory, and advice I've shared so far, nothing teaches faster than real examples. Let me tell you about a few worlds I've built when world building helped elevate the campaign, and when it almost brought everything crashing down. Greyspire was a city I've designed for a long-term political intrigue campaign. I built it with simple pillars, a fallen empire's ruin beneath the city, factions vying for control or rediscovered magic, a crumbling monarchy on its last legs. But what made Greyspire come alive wasn't just the backstory. It was that players could see and touch the consequences. When they explored the black market bazaars in the ruins, when they watched a noble house collapse because of forbidden magic, when a forgotten library beneath the city gave them leverage against the Duke. They weren't hearing about history, they were living it. Greyspire taught me that players bond to the world through actions, not lectures. Now, not every world I built worked so cleanly. Early in my career, I built a setting called The Endless Road. It was a post-apocalyptic fantasy, a crumbling world stitched together by a single massive highway crossing shattered kingdoms. Cool concept, right? The problem: I overbuilt it. I spent months designing ancient civilizations, detailed roadmaps, political factions, and when Session 1 started, my players just wanted to figure out how to survive a broken wagon. They didn't care about the Battle of the 12 Kingdoms from 600 years ago. They wanted to know where the nearest food was. That world stumbled, not because it lacked depth, but because I hadn't connected the world's grandeur to the players' immediate needs. I made the world big and forgot to make it personal. So, quick lessons from these examples. From Greyspire, make the world touchable. Let players see, feel, and shape history. From The Endless Road, always prioritize players' needs first. World building should serve the story, not drown in it. A trick I use now, after I design a piece of world lore, a faction, a location, a historical event, I ask myself, will this affect the players within one session? If yes, I keep it. If no, I either simplify it or leave it vague until needed. It keeps prep tight, focused, and alive. All right, we've covered a lot today. Before we wrap up, there's one last piece I want to leave you with. How to know when your world building is enough and how to avoid the endless spiral of just one more detail. Let's talk about finishing strong. One of the hardest parts of world building isn't starting, it's knowing when to stop. When you love your world, and believe me, you will, it's tempting to keep adding just one more culture, one more kingdom, one more legendary hero. But here's the truth. At some point, you have to close the book and open the gates. You have to let players in. Ask yourself 3 simple questions. Do my players have a clear starting point? Do they have a few immediate goals, dangers, and mysteries to chase? Do they have opportunities to shape the world through their actions? If the answer is yes, you've built enough. Anything else you need can be added later, grown naturally through play. Remember, you don't have to know every secret of your world on day 1. Some of the best moments in long-term campaigns come when the GM discovers the world alongside the players. Maybe you hint at ancient ruins no one remembers, and later, after seeing how much the players care, you flesh them out fully. Maybe an offhand NPC becomes the leader of a rebellion because your players connected with them. Leave space. Build roots, not walls. To build a world that actually works at the table, start with the big picture. Add just enough small details to inspire choices. Let geography and culture create friction. Build history that leaves scars players can touch. Use magic, myth, and mystery to spark wonder. Avoid drowning in lore. And most importantly, leave room for your players to leave their mark. If you do that, it won't just be your world. It'll be their world too. Next time on Dice and Quills, we're going even deeper into the storytelling toolbox. We'll talk about crafting adventure hooks that actually hook and keep players invested from session 1. We'll cover why some hooks fall flat, how to tailor hooks to your players, and how to build momentum that carries an entire campaign. If you've ever struggled to get a group moving, or you want to set up adventures that feel irresistible, you won't want to miss it. If you've enjoyed today's episode, I'd love it if you subscribed to Dice and Quills. And if you have a moment, leave a review on your favorite podcast app. Every review, every rating helps new listeners discover the show and helps me keep bringing these tools and ideas straight to your ears. You can also support the show directly through the link in the show notes, helping me cover production costs, hosting, and future projects. Thank you for imagining, for building, and for sharing the love of storytelling with me. Sharpen your quills, ready your dice. I'll see you next time.